Thank you for joining us today to discuss how the new law, House Bill 24-1379, intersects with stream and wetlands restoration projects. I'd like to introduce myself. So good morning again, everyone. I'm Abby Burk, the Senior Manager of Audubon Rockies Western Rivers Program and a co-chair of the Colorado Healthy Headwaters Working Group. And I'll be your host for today's webinar. My background is in stream ecology and restoration practice, and now I work at the intersection of water policy, project management, and conservation. At Audubon, I lead an interdisciplinary team to support our stream restoration projects, support partner efforts, and help advance water policy and funding initiatives to support Colorado's rivers and wetlands. A big part of my role is bringing people together to align policy, funding, and on-the-ground projects that benefit both people and birds. Thanks for joining us today, and I'm so glad you're here. I'd like to turn it over to a member of our interdisciplinary project team with Audubon and founder of the Colorado Healthy Headwaters Working Group. Jackie, would you mind introducing yourself, please?
Good morning, everyone. So I'm Jackie Corday. I'm here in Montrose, Colorado, and I'm a water and land conservation attorney. And as Abby said, I work closely with Audubon. So thanks for joining us today.
Wonderful. Thank you. Oh, great. We have Pagosa Springs. We have people from all around the state here joining us here this morning. A quick little bit of housekeeping. We have over 230 registrants for this webinar, so we are kindly keeping the audience muted and cameras off to protect everyone's bandwidth. But as you're doing so perfectly, please add any questions that you may have throughout the presentation into the chat. So whenever inspiration arises, please add your questions into the chat. We will hold a 15 to 20 minutes session at the end of our presentation to address these questions and answers. All right, Julie, could you please advance to the next slide, please? All right, thank you very much. So today's webinar is brought to you by the Colorado Healthy Headwaters Working Group. We have the goal of fostering dialogue and understanding and action around pursuing restoration projects in light of the new state wetlands program created by House Bill 1379. Together, we aim to ensure that Colorado's waterways remain resilient, healthy, and vital for generations to come while respecting water rights. The Healthy Headwaters Working Group is a network co-chaired by Jackie and me since 2020, also with support from Nathan Boyer-Recklin, who you probably received a number of emails from. Thank you, Nathan. Is Audubon Rockies Western Rivers Specialist. And so we also work in partnership with leaders across agencies, academia, philanthropy, conservation organizations, and restoration practitioners. We're connected by a shared commitment to restoring Colorado's streams and wetlands. The Colorado Healthy Headwaters Working Group works to advance the pace and scale of ecological stream and wetland restoration through coordinated understanding of policy, law, and projects, specifically translating stream and wetland science and law with decision makers and interested communities across multiple water community sectors. And really, we're focused on bringing people together for durable stream and wetland restoration project support and success. We do have a website with many resources for you, and I will pop that into the chat here in just a moment. And if you are not already on our email list, you can sign up, and I will pop this link into the chat as well, to receive our quarterly newsletter, which also contains timely scientific restoration publications, and also invitations to webinars and timely topics. We're kind of the only statewide collaborative that works in the space of stream restoration at the nexus of policy, law, and projects. Julie, can we have the next slide, please? All right, thank you. So why are we here today? What are we going to cover? First, we're going to look at state permit requirements for the different types of streams, wetland systems that you are restoring, like ephemerals, intermittent, perennial, isolated wetlands. Also, we're going to talk about the passage of House Bill 1379 in 2024, which led to the Water Quality Control Division Regulation 87 rulemaking process during this year in 2025. I'm going to provide you a bit of an overview as it relates to stream restoration projects. So this training is intentionally narrowly focused on serving folks directly working on stream and wetlands restoration projects, so practitioners, project managers, project planners, and those who support that work, like NGOs, foundations, tribes, and agencies. So before we go any further, I want to acknowledge and thank Annette Quill and the team from Colorado Department of Health and Environment for their full review of this presentation for alignment and accuracy prior to our event today. So with that, Jackie, I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Okay, next slide, please. Okay, how we have organized this PowerPoint for you today is from a very practical practitioners type of approach where we are going to walk you through the different types of systems that you may be working in and how that might differ as far as the permitting process or the permit that you need to get. So we're going to start with ephemeral streams. Ephemeral streams that have wetlands, wet meadows associated with them. Maybe they no longer have them, or they used to have them in the past, or they still have them. And what you're really trying to get at is stopping, like in this picture, those nasty head cuts that march up the valley and eat up those wetlands. So that's the type of work we're going to talk about first. So these areas, they're all over the West Slope in particular. A lot of this type of work is happening. They are non-WOTUS because they're in ephemeral streams, and no federal permit is needed. But now what do you need to know about state permitting? That's what we're going to go through. So again, these are examples that photos from Sean Connor with Biologic that he loaned to us for this, and really incredible work that he and other partners are doing in Western Colorado called Zedic rock work. And it's basically stabilizing the erosional head cuts to keep it from destroying the critical meadow habitat that you see up above. Next slide. So here's just some more pictures from Sean. Really nasty head cut. You can see the wetland plants up here, sedges, etc., and filling in that with a rock bowl. And then what's really amazing is usually only 2 years later, you won't even see these anymore. They'll just become blended into the landscape as fine particulate soil comes down and plants start growing. And here's a really great technical resource that we recommend folks take a look at as well to find out more about this type of work. Next slide, please. Here's a project that Abby and I visited, and it shows in August 2021 when the project was installed, the Zedic rock work to come across and stop this head cut. And then when Abby and I visited in August of 2023, you can see you don't even see the rocks anymore. They're completely blended in with the landscape. And so the work, the rocks have successfully helped stop that erosional head cut. The next slide, please. Wanted to give you this other example that's just really incredible. So here on the right-hand side, you see this beautiful ephemeral drainage here, this valley that's all wetlands. And further down the valley over here, you're getting this nasty head cut. So you look at this picture on the left, that is not a stream. That is a head cut draining this beautiful wet meadow. And so the approach that they took to try to stop this head cut and get this to be reconnected with a floodplain is in the next slide, please. And you can see what they installed: simple low-tech process-based restoration structures to stop that head cut. And just 2 years later, that structure is doing the work that they intended it to do, stop that nasty erosion. So these are all ephemeral streams, and this is all work that is going to fit into the particular exemption that HB 1379 provided for. So in the next slide, we are going to talk about that. Oh, I have one more slide. I forgot about this one. No, that's okay. Go ahead to the next slide. This is just one more example in Western Colorado of another really bad head cut that you can see the meadow up above, and this nasty head cut is destroying that. And this is another ephemeral drainage. Okay, so the next slide, we're going to talk about how do you can continue to move forward with work like that. So what we have is a dichotomy here. The dichotomy is based on what year are you doing the work. So if you are doing this kind of work in ephemeral streams, it's voluntary restoration for ecological lift, but you're doing it this year, there's a different process that you're going to need to be aware of and understand. And that is that you're going to need to apply for a temporary authorization from CDPHE, and they will issue a permit that will resemble the Army Corps of Engineers nationwide 27 permit for restoration, enhancement, and establishment activities. To be clear, the Corps is not issuing this permit because it's non-WOTUS. So they only deal with WOTUS, right? Well, but the state now has jurisdiction to issue permits over non-WOTUS, and that permit is going to look and be similar to a nationwide 27 because they've adopted that whole set of permits. And Abby's going to cover this process later in the webinar so that you have a better understanding of how do I do that? How do I apply for that? So if your project is scheduled for 2026 or later, into the later years, well, then by then, CDPHE and the commission will have adopted an exclusion that was provided for in HB 1379 for this particular type of work. And we're going to go into that into the next slide. Okay, so again, if you are restoring ephemeral streams that have or had wetlands, your project will probably likely qualify for a permit exemption. So I'm going to walk you through that permit exemption that was provided for in 1379, and that will be adopted by the rulemaking process this year and be available next year. So the project must be a voluntary stream restoration effort and an ephemeral stream that does not require compensatory mitigation. And there's some more slides further on that we will describe. What do we mean by compensatory mitigation? And the project is solely designed to provide ecological lift. It means you're not doing the project for some other reason like stabilizing a road. You are doing it because you're doing voluntary stream restoration. And ephemeral stream here, this is language right out of HB 1379. It means a stream or a reach of a stream that carries flow during and for a short duration as the direct result of precipitation events, and that has a channel bottom that is always above the groundwater table. So again, think of those slides that I showed you previously of how those projects are taking place in rangelands and their mesic wet areas. That's what this is talking about. An ecological lift means an improvement in the biological health as well as the chemical, geomorphic, or hydrologic health. So that means there's two factors that your project you need to monitor for, that you're doing an improvement in biological health, and then one of these other factors. If you can show that, that's what this is getting at, ecological lift of that. Okay, next slide. So there's another really important thing you need to understand is that if you are working in ephemeral streams that do not have, or they've never had, wetlands, so arroyos, gully washes, these kinds of features that you see in the picture here, then your project is probably going to qualify for a permit exclusion. So there's a different term than exemption. And Abby's going to talk a little bit about the differences between exemption and exclusion. But for now, I wanted to read you the language right out of the statute. So the statute provides for an exclusion for discharge and fill material into swales and erosional features such as gullies, small washes, and rills that do not contain wetlands or an ordinary high water mark. And so if where you're working have neither one of those features, it's an ephemeral gully wash, then it would be excluded from having to get a permit from the state. And it's also non-WOTUS, so you don't, of course, have to get a federal permit. Okay, next slide. All right, so now we're going to talk about another type of system, and that's intermittent systems. Your project may be within a WOTUS if you're working in an intermittent stream. And if that's true, a 404 permit is going to be required for your project. So restoration projects that are in an intermittent stream with relatively permanent waters, and wetlands having a continuous surface connection to relatively permanent waters. Those are still WOTUS, and you would need to go to the Army Corps of Engineers to get a permit for your project. And it's most likely going to be covered under a nationwide 27. And I'm going to assume that a lot of folks on this call are very familiar with nationwide 27s. And there's 2 Army Corps districts in Colorado. There's the Omaha district in the green and the Albuquerque district in the red. And those are the 2 districts. Depending on where your project is, you need to go to one of those offices to apply for a nationwide 27 if you're working in a intermittent WOTUS. So next slide. All right, what if you're working in an intermittent system that is not a WOTUS? So maybe you went to the Army Corps to say, hey, I think this is non-jurisdictional, that it's not a WOTUS, and they confirm that, and they say, nope, we don't have jurisdiction over this area. Well, that means you are in a non-WOTUS, and the state has jurisdiction over that, and a state authorization is going to be required. Again, the commission is going to adopt all of the similar nationwide 27 permit for Colorado. Right now, it's already been done for the temporary authorizations for 2025, but in 2026, there will be a similar nationwide 27 adopted for working in non-WOTUS intermittent streams. Okay. And the bill also allows the commission to create additional general authorizations to achieve greater efficiency and to address Colorado-specific needs, such as emergency response to wildfire and voluntary ecological restoration. So stay tuned as this particular one continues to get developed over the course of the year. Next slide. And I just wanted to show you a classic picture of an intermittent stream in western Colorado. Again, there's Abby in the foreground on a field trip that we had. And then this is definitely an intermittent stream. And so you would need, if you're doing work in this type of system, it's non-WOTUS, and you would need to get a state authorization. Okay, next slide. Okay, what if you're working in a perennial system? Well, if you're working in a perennial system, it's almost 100% guaranteed you're working in a WOTUS, and that is going to require a federal permit, a nationwide 27. So your project, if that is the case, if your project is completely 100% in a WOTUS and covered by the nationwide 27, what's really important here is that you will not have to get an additional state permit to cover that. So if you are 100% in WOTUS, 100% covered by that nationwide 27, you do not need to go and get another state permit. But what if your project is in both WOTUS and non-WOTUS? Maybe you're working on a perennial stream, but your whole project area covers also non-WOTUS waters and maybe part of an intermittent tributary that's coming in that is determined to be non-WOTUS, then you're going to need both. You're going to need that federal permit for the WOTUS and then the state permit for the non-WOTUS. And it is not known yet if a joint application will be developed. Just wanted to let you know there's still conversations between Army Corps and CDPHE in regards to that. So stay tuned on that one. Okay, next slide. All right. So the next type of system that we're going to talk about is isolated wetlands. And of course, those are non-WOTUS. They are not covered by Army Corps of Engineers WOTUS types of permits. So the bill, HB 1379, directs the commission to issue a statewide general authorization for discharges to isolated state waters. There's a lot to unpack in that sentence. So that's what we're going to kind of walk through that. Isolated state waters includes isolated wetlands and isolated ponds and impoundments. Then the bill defines isolated wetlands as not including wetlands located within the 100-year floodplain and or within 1,500 feet of the ordinary high water mark of other state waters. So that means that if you are within an isolated water, you're working within an isolated water, your project is, then there's going to be available next year a general permit, which will help streamline your project and the whole approval process. But if you're working inside of in this definition, then it's not an isolated water, then you're going to need to get either potentially your project may still fit under something similar to a nationwide 27. So stay tuned on that one. That is still a work in progress. So the other thing to note about this one is on the next slide. There we go. Isolated waters does not apply to fens, peatlands, and kettle ponds, the very special, more highly important and much harder to replace these types of wetlands. And so the bill carved out and said, hey, isolated wetlands, no matter what, does not include fens, peatlands, and kettle ponds. And it doesn't include if you're going to be adversely permanently impacting wetlands over 1/10 of an acre or 0.03 of an acre of stream bed. So that language that you see in front of you here is just straight out of the bill, again, saying what I just said. So next slide. Okay, just a couple of slides on compensatory mitigation. We're not taking any kind of deep dive on that topic in this webinar because we could do a whole nother huge webinar just on that. And then it is something that's a work in progress. This is what's happening right now during the Reg 87 rulemaking process. This is all going to be fleshed out. But the bill provided for the core foundational things, defining compensatory mitigation, as you see in this quote right from the bill. And in the next slide, we're going to see what triggers the need for compensatory mitigation. And this is what's so important to our webinar today for folks to understand. We've designed this webinar, again, as Abby had stated, to be very narrowly focused on what practitioners and project planners and supporters need to understand in regards to compensatory mitigation. Is their project going to trigger the need for it or not? And so when you read this, again, it brings up those numbers of greater than 1/10 of an acre or 3/100 of an acre of streams. But the most important language is here is that you're having to do compensatory mitigation when you permanently adversely impact these resources, wetlands or streams. And you're not doing that in a stream restoration project, right? You are restoring it. You're not permanently adversely impacting it like building a parking lot in wetlands. No, you're the very reason you're doing your project is to restore it. So for the most part, you should not be having to deal with any compensatory mitigation that you're not causing any permanent. You may cause temporary, like for example, if you have to build let's say a small temporary access road to get to your project that maybe crosses an ephemeral wash, and but you fully intend to restore that at the end of the project. So again, that would not subject you to having to do compensatory mitigation if it's completely temporary, any impact that you're going to have. Okay, I know that there might be questions on this, and again, please put them in the chat because that's a lot to unpack right there. But we're going to move on to the next slide. And this is the summary. This is the chart that tries to put everything together into one place of what we just went through as far as for ephemeral, intermittent, perennial, and non-WOTUS wetlands. And so again, this is a resource that you will all have access to because we're going to be sharing this webinar soon after with everybody. And so don't worry, you will have access to this chart. I'm not going to go through it because that would take about 5 minutes. But again, it's everything that I just said all in one place. So take a screenshot if that will help you. Totally go ahead and do that right now. And I'll pause just for a moment for folks if you want to do that. And then I'm going to pass it to Abby for the next slide.
Great.
All
Jackie,
right.
thank you. And I think we can also PDF that chart too,
Yes.
and we can include that in the follow-up email. So don't worry if you missed that one. And thanks everyone for just the really thoughtful responses in the chat and all of these. And I promise you, we will be providing a robust follow-up email, including all of the links that I am feverishly putting into the chat as we are going through. So you will also have all of that coming at you through your registration email. And so give us about a week and we'll get the recording and all of these links to you in a follow-up. So just thank you again for all the great engagement there. And I'm going to pop another couple of links into the chat before I start off here. So again, thank you, Jackie, and thank you, everyone. It's good to just kind of pause for a second and see where we are in this overall process. There are two blogs that I just popped into the chat that we wrote kind of the first one engages kind of in the process of House Bill 1379, some of the lead up. And the second link there is kind of where we are in this process right now, and just a little bit more words than we're going to give it at the moment. So to orientate where we are, looking at this slide, folks remember House Bill 1379 went through very late in the 24 legislative session. And now in 2025, we are in this rulemaking process around Regulation 87. So these next couple of slides are from Colorado Department of Health and Environment. So I will probably abbreviate that by CDPHE. And so these next couple slides are from the CDPHE March 2025 workshop on projects, and it's the temporary authorizations training. And so that link, there was a bunch of CDPHE links that I popped into the chat just a few moments ago. And so you will have all the links as well as I move through these slides. Julie, let's go ahead to the next one, please. Oh, you're already there. Oh, nope, that's the one. Thank you. So one more forward, Julie. Sorry about that. Thank you. So again, the CDPHE Temporary Authorizations Workshop in March, these slides are from that workshop, and the link is in the chat to the actual recording of that March workshop. And this training walked folks through how the new dredge and fill program will work in 2025 until Regulation 87 is adopted in 2026 by the Water Quality Control Commission. And so in this space where we are now, the bullets on the right here, until the commission promulgates Regulation 87, the division cannot issue general or individual authorizations. Discharges without an authorization is a violation of House Bill 1379. U.S. Army Corps of Engineer nationwide permit and the RGP constitute valid authorizations in 2025. The division has 45 days to issue a temporary authorization from the date of receiving a complete application. And we'll screenshot what that application looks like here in a second. Temporary authorizations are valid for 2 years from the date of issuance. So what you need to know in 2025 for your projects, they have developed, CDPHE has developed a form, and that form is kind of shown on the left slide here. You need to submit an application to work in a non-WOTUS area covered under the new statute. And to find out more about the form, that link is in the chat about the form. And I want to just note that people are very familiar with the CDPHE Dredge and Fill Public Stakeholder Engagement webpage, which is also in the chat, but that form has its own unique link. Okay, next slide, Julie, please. All right. So, as you recall, the temporary authorization determination checklist, you can, number one, what is the jurisdiction of the water feature? So looking at it, if it's not a WOTUS, it's a state water. Okay. So in number two, is the project an exempted activity or occurring in an excluded water feature? So recall that permit exemption for voluntary ephemeral stream restoration done solely for ecological lift, and the permit exclusion for arroyos or washes that do not contain wetlands. An exemption is for a dredge and fill activity that is within a jurisdictional state water. House Bill 1379 allowed for a total of 13 permit exemptions for certain types of projects. Now, whereas a permit exclusion means that House Bill 1379 has carved out areas from state waters. They are exclusions from jurisdiction. There are 11 exclusions in House Bill 1379, such as agricultural ditches, canals, stormwater control features, and more, that all meet certain criteria. You need to document why your project would fit under an exemption or an exclusion. If all of the criteria are met, you don't have to give CDPHE notice. As of now, we are still waiting for a final decision on that. So going to point number 3, as we stated, that will be a nationwide 27 for stream and wetland restoration projects. As we mentioned, this is most relevant to non-WOTUS intermittent stream restoration projects, as ephemeral stream restoration projects can qualify for a permit exemption, and perennial stream projects need a nationwide 27 and hence do not need a state permit. Okay, there's a lot of information in that. Number 4, nationwide 27s require a PCN to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, with some exceptions that we just don't have time to go into in this short webinar today. And lastly, point number 5, as we mentioned, this does not apply to restoration projects that cause no permanent adverse impacts to wetlands or the stream bed. Okay, let that kind of marinate for a second. Julie, let's go ahead on to the next slide. Thank you. On this slide are tools that CDPHE says are acceptable tools to be working with when determining ephemeral and intermittent. As a lot of our audience knows, this can be tricky. If there are any concerns or questions in the determination between ephemeral and intermittent, we definitely recommend hiring a consultant to assist in this. Okay, Julie, let's go to the next one. Thank you. Here are the website screenshots that I had mentioned before. So let's say you've determined that your project will be in a non-WOTUS intermittent stream. And so you need to get a state permit. The next 3 slides orientate us to where to find that information for the application. Okay, next slide, please. All right. So, and this is all laid out on the CDPHE's website. Again, these are just screenshots. So notice kind of step 2, you've got some instructions to move through that are detailed here on this page. Julie, let's go ahead to the next one. Thank you. And in this middle red box, you'll see here when you're live on the website, maybe you're already on it while we're talking through it through the link in the chat. You would download the application and fill this out completely. And so that's a click on the red box in the middle. And this also is a very important step because it serves as the pre-construction notification. Okay. All right, next and final slide until we get ready to get into questions and answers. So I haven't been monitoring the chat for the last few moments. So if you have questions, please pop them into the chat. And given enough time, we'll also unmute and be able to have a conversation about a bit more of this too. All right, Julie, thank you. As we are in this interim period before we have a final regulation 87, and the rulemaking process continues through this December, so December 2025, the best way to engage in this entire process is by visiting the CDPHE Dredge and Fill engagement site. And that is the top link here on this slide, and it is also one of the links in the chat. The monthly CDPHE Dredge and Fill Regulation 87 stakeholder meetings are dedicated to facilitating collaborative input and transparent dialogue around the development and implementation of Colorado's state-level dredge and fill permitting program. These meetings are monthly, and they are specifically focused on 1, informing stakeholders about the progress of Regulation 87, the development and the implementation timelines, 2, gathering input from a wide range of stakeholders, including local governments, environmental groups, industry, landowners, and restoration practitioners. 3rd, it's really great for clarifying the permitting process. For looking at the performance standards and jurisdictional scope for stream and wetland dredge and fill activities in Colorado. And last but not least, we find that these meetings are really working to build consensus around regulatory approaches that balance ecological protection and practical implementation needs. The meetings are part of the Colorado Department of Health and Environment's commitment to inclusive rulemaking and science-informed water resource management under the Colorado Water Quality Control Commission framework. And also, as a resource for you, again, remember, we will follow up today's training and webinar with an email to registrants, the recording of this webinar with links that we've mentioned. And so hopefully we'll have just an entire menu of resources for you in this reply email if you registered. So again, I just want to thank you again for joining us today. And we're going to go to questions and answers for the balance of the time. So Jackie, thanks for hopping back on screen. I think, Julie, we can go ahead and maybe stop screen sharing for the moment, if that works for you. Thank you for driving the presentation. And Jackie, I'm just going to take a second here and go through the chat.
I see a question from Shannon.
Okay.
Do you see that one? And I can take that one and then see what else. That's the only one that I see right now.
Okay.
So the question is there a pre-construction notice required for temporary authorizations for state waters following nationwide 27 for voluntary restoration and ephemeral drainages? So this is that kind of oddball moment that we're in 2025 that it's not, I don't believe CDPHE is calling it a PCN. They're just saying, okay, in 2025, you're going to need to come to us and apply for the temporary authorization. And so that was the slide Abby showed where there was on that website, there's an application form. You fill that out and it goes to CDPHE staff that are working in the new division that was, or not division, but department, I think, created for this to take care of dredge and fill permits. So the answer is you do need to fill that out, that temporary authorization. I don't think it's called a PCN, though. I don't think that they're putting that label on it. If that answers your question, I'm great. If not, go ahead and
Great.
you could unmute yourself and we can talk.
Okay. We're just going to go ahead on through Jackie as well. Hang on one second here. And for folks, I know that I popped a lot of different links into the chat kind of at once from CDPHE. The last link that I just popped in to everyone is that link to the application we were talking about. So just to make sure that you have that highlighted and identified. Jackie, the next question I'm going to ask is from Anna. And Anna writes, I assume that all of this applies to federally funded projects too, right? If a federal project is occurring on non-WOTUS, then that federal agency must complete the relevant state permitting process, right?
It's really, that's a great question. Yes, it is. As far as I know, yes, the answer would be they would need to fill that out as well.
Okay, great. Next question is, just a quick clarifier, Jackie. Were you kind of using the words authorization and permit? Are they interchangeable or are they different?
They are interchangeable. In HB 1379, they, whatever reason, I don't know, they decided to call it authorization. So what CDPHE will be issuing is for in 2025 is a temporary authorization, and then next year it will be a general authorization or an individual authorization. But yes, it's a permit.
Great. I have another question here in regard to isolated wetlands. Should it be not within 1,500 feet of the ordinary high water mark or of other WOTUS? Or is it within 1,500 feet of state waters as stated in the slide?
Yeah, so if where you're working, the activity restoration project that you're working, if it is outside of the 1,500 feet or the floodplain, it is an isolated wetland. That's the definition of an isolated wetland. If the wetland occurs outside of the 1,500 feet of an ordinary high water mark or the floodplain. If it's inside, then it's not an isolated wetland, and you're not going to have that general isolated wetlands permit. You'll have to probably get something more akin to a nationwide 27 type of permit, again, from the state, because it may still be non-WOTUS, right? Because that is what really changed under Sackett. What you can call WOTUS now is on wetlands that are not immediately adjacent and continuous is non-WOTUS. So that means that there's a lot of wetlands in floodplains that are not immediately continuous. Maybe they're 100 feet away from that ordinary high water mark, but they're within the floodplain. Well, that makes them not contiguous, so they're not WOTUS, but they certainly are a state wetland, and that makes them not an isolated wetland under the state definition. Hope that helped.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jackie. And again, just thank you to everyone for the thoughtful questions and engagement. This is not easy. You know, Colorado is leading the way nationally in setting up a state dredge and fill program. We've had a few other states come aboard as well, moving towards this. But, when we are working towards a solution together in such a complex topic, it just takes a lot of thought and deep insight going forward. So again, I just want to thank everybody for their engagement in this space, because this is really where statute and a new regulation will all touch the ground in projects. And so there are many filters and lenses, so to speak, as we go from law to on the ground in this process. So, we're far from through it, as well as the official rulemaking process will begin here shortly this summer and last through December of 2025. So, Jackie, would you be able to talk a little bit more about kind of the connectivity of surface water? When we're talking, I think you touched on it just a bit now in your past response, but as what is the importance of surface water connectivity in the WOTUS definition where we are now in Colorado?
Yeah, that is something that was laid out in Sackett. And in that, the final ruling from that was that you had to have this continuous surface connection from the water, the state or the federal water, which is the river. Let's say if you have a river and you have wetlands right immediately continuous to that, that's all going to be WOTUS. But if you have some kind of interruption, even if it's man-made, like a levee, so a levee comes along and divides the river from its continuous floodplain wetlands, now under Sackett, that is no longer a WOTUS, that wetland that's on the other side, because it's not continuous. And so that's why that was controversial, let's just say it that way, because we know that there is a connection. There's the groundwater connection for sure. And here's this man-made disconnection that was caused. So that's why it was one of those rulings that it definitely caused a lot of controversy from the scientific perspective of like, it should be counted as WOTUS. But in the state, if you had that situation, that would not be an isolated wetland. That was what I was trying to give as an example. That was disconnected by this levee. So now you only have WOTUS on the one side of the levee, and the wetlands on the other side are in the floodplain and no longer WOTUS, but though they are a state water and they're not isolated because they're in the floodplain.
Thank you, Jackie. And for folks, I'm just popping in also in I think the first Audubon blog link here, but in the chat is our definition now of state waters for you to take a look at and how that has changed. Great. And I did just get another question, Jackie, and just so folks know, please, this is your time. There are no too simple of a question, or if they're complex, we might get back with you, but nonetheless, this can be a tough topic. And so please use the time, and if we can help discuss and come to a solution and an answer, please pop your question into the chat. Jackie, can we talk a little bit about water rights and how the discussion around water rights, has it played any role in these permitting processes or in the rulemaking sessions? Could you talk a little bit on that, on the interplay of water rights in this space?
Yeah, I'm going to go right to the bill itself. That's always the best thing I find when you get into this type of question is to find the language right in the bill itself, because the way that state law is structured around water rights is that water rights cannot be impacted by water quality regulations. So that was already a foundational tenet before going into drafting this bill. There's already a statute that says you cannot impact water rights by a decision in the way that the permit, maybe say under a 401, I believe, would be structured. And so that was the same thing that was copied and pasted into HB 1379, is that they can't adversely impact water rights. And so I'm just going to take a moment just to see if I can find that language, and then I can read it right from the bill, Abby. So if there's
Good thing.
something else why I look for that.
Absolutely. We don't have any other questions in the chat at the moment. And, oh, great. We just did get another question that I will ask in just a second. So Jackie, take your time with the water rights. And again, just to let folks know, we will have a multifaceted email coming to you as soon as we have the recording available from this session. And so we will absolutely share all of these links that we have had with you. And just, this is also an opportunity for dialogue with Jackie and myself, that if you come up with another question later this afternoon, tomorrow, as this information kind of percolates with you, please don't hesitate to email that to us. And we're happy to try to track down those answers for you as well.
Yeah, I think that the water rights one may have to be a follow-up, because I don't want to hold folks up, and I want to make sure I, follow up with
Okay.
the bill language specifically that gets at that question.
Absolutely. That is completely fair, but that water rights discussion was certainly played a central role during the legislative session around House Bill 1379 as it was moving through. And it has certainly been a theme as well, through the rulemaking process. So it's definitely something folks are still talking quite a bit about. We have a question from Joe here, and Jackie, let's see if there's a possibility. And so it looks like Joe uses EPA Water's GeoViewer to determine WOTUS versus non-WOTUS. Do you have any idea if this is an accurate resource to reference?
I'm sorry, Abby, I didn't quite get the source of.
Sure. EPA Water's GeoViewer. That is something we can also look into and follow up if necessary.
Yeah, because I would want to look at that and see if it's been updated post Sackett to make sure. And then there was the rules that had to be adopted by the Biden administration post Sackett to conform the 404 program and the Clean Water Act definition of WOTUS. Now those rules are probably going to get changed again with the new administration. So it's such a moving target. What is WOTUS, right? And we've dealt with that for 30 some odd years, that it's a moving target back and forth, back and forth. And that is specifically why the state legislature, in their wisdom, decided, hey, let's be dealing with state waters. Let's make our program based on state waters. So
that may be something that we can look into before that follow-up email comes back. We've got a couple of very specific questions kind of coming in and that sort of thing. And as much as we would love to help and really get into these, should I notify the state or should I not if I have this project type or that project type? And, it's really, I don't want to speak for Jackie as well, but we oftentimes, if you're in question, go ahead and notify the state because we are in this interim period where we will have some clarity for sure after Regulation 87 is finalized, and it looks to be probably in place I don't think January may be a little quick, but at least by February, so before the 2026 project season really kicks out underway, there will be clarity. We are offering today's webinar just as we are in this interim period right now until we have a finalized Regulation 87, and in the efforts to not hold up projects and try to provide a compass bearing on how to move forward while we're in this interim period, that's what brings us here today. But we are just about to time, and so I think I'll give everybody maybe 2 or 3 more minutes back of their day, and we'll go ahead and wrap it up for this webinar today. And want to thank everyone again for joining us today on a very deep topic, and we are absolutely here for you. We're looking forward to our next engagement event, and we will be in touch very shortly with our follow-up email. And I want to thank our Audubon Rockies staff for providing webinar support today. I certainly want to thank Jackie for the great insight. I want to thank Annette Quill again from CDPHE for reviewing all of the slides and information before we presented with you today. And we wish you a great rest of your day. So thank you again for joining us. Take care.